You know what you're listening to, right? 3, 2, 1.
Uzima Health and Wellness.
What the doctor say?
Hey, this is Dr. K with What the Doctor Say. It's Uzima Health and Wellness podcast. I'm welcoming Dr. Kylar Keith Wiltz, third-year medical student, MS3 from Howard. I had a medical professor who would always tell us, you are a doctor once you get accepted into medical school. So we're going to claim it, as we say.
Amen to that. Yes, ma'am. Amen.
So welcome to the show, Dr. Wiltz. I'm just so impressed by your resume, first of all. I'm impressed by you because the brother put on one of the best residency fairs that I've ever been to, and I've been keeping in touch with you ever since, right?
Yes, ma'am. It's been great. I've been learning a lot from you. You've been putting me on game. I love the work you do in the community. It's also something big to me as well. So, you know, we met at the residency fair and we've been rocking out since.
We've been rocking
thank you very much.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love your energy. So let's slow it down here and let's start from the top, you know, like Drake says, started from the bottom. Now we're here.
Amen to that, because it's been a long way.
It's been a long way. Well, you make it look good, brother. Let me just say, you are from Breaux Bridge, Louisiana. And what it says there is that this is the entry point to the Southern Cajun living and lifestyle. I looked it up now. It said you are the crawfish capital of the United States of America.
Best in the world. Best in the world.
And okay. And you are the home of Zydeco Funk. Now, I grew up in Houston, so I know what Zydeco Funk is.
Yes, ma'am.
So what do you want us to know about growing up as a Black man, as a young Black boy into a man in Breaux Bridge, Louisiana?
Yeah, so it's really crazy. I always tell this to people. I'm very happy about where I came from. I love my hometown. If you look at any of my posts when I, make an accomplishment, I always put a hashtag in Exit 109 because on Interstate 10, that's our exit to hop right off. It definitely is a real traditional upbringing, real Southern. Definitely was a culture shock, when I moved to DC because I had never been exposed to that much diversity and you just know the fast-paced lifestyle of a city. But I grew up, my cousins were like my brothers and my sisters, very tight-knit family. At one point lived with my grandparents. So, family's always been a real big part of me. It's funny that you actually looked up the information on Breaux Bridge because when people ask me where I'm from, because it always comes from the accent. And I tell them I'm from Breaux Bridge. And they say, where is that? And of course, sometimes I go across I-10. I'm like, where Baton Rouge is? They say, where New Orleans is? Yeah, 2 hours away from New Orleans. But the thing that always gets everybody is I tell them, have you ever heard of the show Swamp People? And everyone's heard of that show with where they hunt the alligators and all of this. Well, growing up, we used to go fishing in some of these same places. So it's about 15, 20 minutes from where I grew up. But overall, I definitely attest, my mentality, my humbleness, my dedication to community work, to my upbringing.
I didn't have to just look it up. I worked in that area.
You did.
When I finished family medicine and they needed an emergency medicine physician down in Houma, Louisiana. I was like, okay, gotta go. And so I took the ferry from Galveston to over to Beaumont, and I was headed to Houma, Louisiana. So I transversed I-10. I went down past New Iberia. Exactly. And so, of course, and then I also worked at Lafayette Heart Hospital. So right before I got to Lafayette, there would be that exit for Breaux Bridge. And so I would see that sign. I think it even has a crawfish on it. But what I really want to say is, the people in places like Houma, Terrebonne Parish, Lafayette, Breaux Bridge, which is St. Martin's Parish, if I'm not mistaken. You all are what I would call the salt of the earth people. I would be the Christmas doc in these smaller emergency rooms, and the paramedics would come through and they would drop off me some crawfish etouffee.
That would definitely make it do better.
And they made sure that their doctor was fed. And so that was very special. And they would call me Dr. Baby. They're like, you look too young to be a doctor. So the nurse said, okay, we're going to call you Dr. Baby. And I said, that's fine. Just as long as you put a handle on it. And we would rock and roll and take care of the people in the community. So specifically, tell me about growing up in terms of the educational system. Give me, Give me a day in the life so that I can appreciate what a rural upbringing means.
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing for me, as much as, my upbringing influenced me, as I mentioned before, family. I was raised by educators, right? My mom was a teacher. My dad got married to my stepmom when I was, I think, 11. She's like a English teaching specialist. My dad was a coach most of my life and a teacher as well. So it always was really emphasized the importance of education within my house. With that being said, a lot of the schools I went to, because again, private schools weren't really in the picture for me and my siblings. Not only was it just kind of expensive, but it was a lot of us. I'm the oldest of like 9, including my birth siblings and also my step siblings as well. So we were a pretty big family. But regardless of those, being able to come home and having my parents just constantly like, make sure you read, make sure you put your best step forward. It allowed me and all of my siblings to kind of blossom in that regard. As far as the public school systems in Louisiana, I think we hear about the statistics, right? 49th here, 50th and some other ones, and just kind of teeters back and forth. So my middle school was, I think, a D school or something. So was my elementary school. But as I got to high school, I think we were more in like the C range. Comparative to a lot of my peers up on this, medical journey that I've been on, even once I got to Xavier in college, a lot of them that, have gone to like the better public schools or even like the more resourceful private schools. There's definitely kind of like a teetering in the resources that they have comparatively. But I definitely think that my parents putting that extra energy into me and also the investment of my teachers and even my peers made up for whatever we may have been missing in funding our education resources. And I definitely think it worked out pretty well for a lot of us.
Did you have an extracurricular or you were an athlete? Young Black guy. You had to be an athlete, right?
I say this often. If I would have ended up being like 6'4", I would not be in medicine. I probably would be playing a sport like my younger brother who's 6'2" and he plays Division I football. I mean, my very first memories of my dad would dribbling a basketball in the high school gym while mom would drop us off with him while he was at practice. So from very on, very active. I played football, basketball, baseball. I was in 4-H, Beta Club, National Honor Society. I did all the science fairs, social studies fairs, whatever you could think of. My parents is like, you're going to do it, because having to overcome not being, probably as challenged academically, they had to find ways to continue to keep me motivated and engaged. So, I was a busy kid, but that's also like when you talk a lot, that's why I always have something going on, because as much as I may fuss about being busy, I can't function if I'm not busy, because it's all I know at this point.
So the question is, you graduated from high school and you chose Xavier University.
Yes, ma'am.
I know there's a lot of tradition in Louisiana. I mean, you got your Xavier families, you got your Dillard families. Why Xavier?
I'll be completely honest and transparent with you, Dr. K. I did not know what like an HBCU was, in high school, which is wild, because I have a lot of family members that went to Xavier. My dad graduated from Southern.
He's a Southern graduate. We got a shout out to Southern University in Baton Rouge. I know something about Southern. Oh, they have a band. The band is
really good.
Right.
That band is, I think they call it the Human Jukebox. That's a really good band.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
In all seriousness, they also have one of the finest law schools, and they produce some of the finest lawyers that the United States has had, particularly when it comes with Black lawyers. But they have produced outstanding lawyers.
I also think Southern is the only HBCU is like a multi-campus system. So all over the state, Southern has campuses. That's also just a pretty cool tidbit. But yeah, so growing up, my biggest thing was I wanted to go to Harvard. That was, my ride or die. When I was like a sophomore, I was getting like a lot of letters from Ivy Leagues. I did really well on my ACT early on. So I got like a lot of letters from Ivy Leagues, but Harvard was the spot. But then I forgot, I think I went somewhere and I was like, okay, I don't know if I could do this away from my family type of deal. And I was like, oh, Tulane is also really, really good. So when it came time to apply for college, I only applied to 2 schools, Tulane and Loyola. Right, in New Orleans, I was like, it's a fairly decent way from home, but also, could challenge myself academically. And I got into both of the schools and I got scholarships, but it wasn't full. I mean, I knew my parents couldn't help me pay for school, and I also didn't want to put out loans because medical school is expensive. So one of my cousins who graduated, he's a pharmacist. He graduated from Xavier, and he was like, "You ever thought about Xavier?" And I was like, "Not really. Like, what is that?" And, he just kind of like started putting me on game, and I went on a tour, fell in love with the campus. I applied, got a full ride, and the rest is history. Loved everything about it. I feel like I was not only challenged, but I had the support system that I didn't really have as far as being in high school, going from what I would probably consider more of like a PWI type of high school. I think we were more around 55 to 60% white at the time, to like an HBCU where it's 95%. And, a lot of my teachers, if not all of my teachers, looked like me.
Correct.
So it definitely was an adjustment when I first got there, but I loved it. I loved the man that I became at the time. I loved the student that I evolved into, and also the leader. I think that was the biggest thing for me. My leadership skills definitely evolved.
Well, we call Xavier the Emerald City, right?
Because of the green tops.
That's right. First of all, let's give the shout out to Xavier. I've met plenty fine Xavier graduates and know them because I also grew up in Houston. And so some of my friends were diehard. We're going to Xavier, and I went to Atlanta. So, we would like throw it up. If you're going to the 504, throw it up if you're going to the 404. And we wished each other well. But my friends that went to Xavier, they already knew. They knew that's where they were going. So there's steeped in tradition. And I have not met any Xavier graduate who has been disappointed. They all have said the same thing. I became the best version of myself, prepared me for a great future. We also want to acknowledge that Xavier has been, bar none, one of the top producing schools for preparing Black medical students and getting you ready for medical school. I think Prairie View and Xavier are both one and two, or two and one. I don't know which one, but I know that you both do a fine job. Both institutions do a fine job of preparing their students for medical school. So you say your leadership. Something that struck me on your resume, it said that you was involved in terms of independent grassroots activities. And it sounded like, of all of the things on your resume, that actually stood out, that you went back to your hometown, Breaux Bridge, Louisiana, and you helped with COVID, and you helped with the voter registration drive initiatives in your area. And I'm sure you did other work as well. Talk about that work, and also what it means to be an advocate for your own community.
Yes, ma'am. So it's great that you actually mentioned that. Remember, not this week, but the last time we spoke, I told you I was going back home because I was planning an event. So I want to say it was in July. We did a back to school bash. Me and my mom, in partnership with some other organizations, and we were able to, I think it was around like 160 book sacks with school supplies and everything we were able to give to the students. We also gave them like other learning tools, had a free barbecue and everything, fun jumps. We had the news people come. I ran a suture clinic for all of the kids that were interested in being doctors or nurses or anything within healthcare. And I think for me, the biggest thing, and as I told the kids, as I said to the news people, is, growing up, I didn't have that, right? I couldn't look at somebody and say, I want to be a doctor. So how do I get there? Or what do I have to do? Or not even being a doctor. Like, I just want to go to college, right? Like, I want to make my environment better, and I want to be better, right? And that's been the biggest thing for me, just serving as that role model or as that pillar for a lot of young people to lean on. My biggest motto as of late has been, while I may not be the first person to do something, I can at least be very happy with not being the last person, and making sure that, whatever steps I take, I'm just paving the road for more people to take and push that road further. It always just, again, kind of starts at home, right? I remember being 11, 12 years old, my parents waking me up on the weekends to go work at the food bank. Yes. When my dad got married to my stepmom, her parents are pastors. So within the church, free garage sales, where people could just come and get furniture, clothes, whatever they want for absolutely free. We would hand out food. We do food pantries. So, my entire life has been dedicated to public service and community service, just being able to give back. So regardless of how busy I may be, I always try to put that within my schedule, because that's something real dear and close to my heart.
That's the same thing for myself as well. We grew up in the community centers, and I think it's very important that students, not even just the ones tracking for medical school, but we teach our young students in high school to do some type of volunteer service and make sure they actively participate. Don't just show up and, right now we do have to struggle with them getting off their phone. You came and supported me at my Lace Up activity that's leading athletes.
It's an amazing event, by the way. I loved it. We had such a great time. We had such a great time.
And you're right. And you don't have time to get on your phone. You know why? Because you're too busy interacting with kids, giving them dental supplies. And that's what it's all about. Like, you got to do something. Have you ever done Habitat for Humanity in your area, or is that like?
I actually haven't. I honestly don't know the presence of Habitat for Humanity where I'm from. But again, like a lot of the stuff that I do, with my family, just kind of like stuff that I'll come up with an idea. And my family, not only my parents, but my immediate family, like even my first cousins, we did a basketball tournament where I originally did voter registration and got around 250 people registered to vote.
Tell me about this voter push. Why are you passionate about the voting push in your area? Why is that important?
So I think the biggest thing that jumped out to me was in the age of social media and Twitter and a lot of things, right? I just kind of got a hint of just a lot of people having like a lot of different concerns and just always feeling like their voices weren't being heard, right? And that was always a constant narrative where I came from, right? Brobridge, Louisiana, I think, we have a nice fraction of our population who are beneath the poverty line. There are a lot of socio-economic things that aren't, doing too well there. And, the biggest way for us within our democratic process to be active and for our voices to be heard is going in there and checking on that ballot box, right? And while I don't believe that that's, the end all be all and that there needs to be more work, that's a first step for us. I feel strongly about voting. We had, a lot of our ancestors in the civil rights movement. That's something that they fought for our voices to be heard. And I definitely think that bare minimum to pay homage to them, but also to do justice to ourselves, right? That's just something that, we can take more serious. And not only just as, specifically saying we as just in Black people, but just Americans in general, right? I think a lot of people were very upset in the 2016 election with President Trump, but literally immediately afterwards, I want to say in 2020, was when we did our first voter registration drive. And we did a breakdown of like the election results and, what essentially went wrong. And then once you kind of look at the numbers of how many people either didn't vote or weren't registered to vote during that time period, it tells you the story of why the election happened the way it did. For me, it was just like, okay, that's an issue that I know that I can push and get, it may like be a million people or hundreds of thousands. If I get little chunks of people here and there, then they can get people. And that is how you start to build a community conscience about how we become more active within our communities to be the change that we really want.
And this is important in small rural America as well, that we have to make sure that we understand the importance of voting and as generations come about, that they understand that this is how you keep services in rural America. This is how you keep funding in rural America, by making sure that they don't discount your town. And therefore services don't dry up, and that when the cities and the larger areas, I guess that would be Lafayette for you, or Baton Rouge even, that when you're thinking about whether it's healthcare services, ambulance services, other infrastructural needs, that Brobridge is always, being recognized, and that's really through the vote. So I think that's outstanding. You said you went to Xavier knowing that you wanted to be a physician. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am. Before college, I was on the fence of law and medicine. I want to say around my sophomore year, I did this program. And you probably know the hospital, UMC in Lafayette.
Yes.
And it was a month-long program, if I'm not mistaken, either 2 weeks or a month. And we got to go in there and actually work with the doctors. And that was my first time, getting to see what an OR looks like, right? And while I didn't specifically know the totality of what was going on, just the feeling of being in there and seeing all of the blinking lights and just, the monitors, it was an adrenaline rush for me that's just like still to this day, every time I go in the OR, I still feel the same way. And that's just kind of what pushed me to like, okay, I have to be a surgeon. Like, most people say, like I need a job that even on my worst day I can do. But for me, it's like, I honestly can't see myself doing anything else. And that's a feeling I hope everyone finds in their journey to find their career and their passion.
So you knew that was your trajectory. So because what I'm looking at is, We keep talking about this low percentage of Black Americans. I'm going to say Black Americans, just to be very clear, that we are children who are from generations, who are families who were born into America. And, our forefathers were part of the diaspora and part enslavement, and we've evolved. And so I want to be clear what the demographics that we're talking about. We're talking about Black American students, 6.5%, maybe even less, to be honest with you, depending on the day. But we're still hovering around between 5.5 and let's say a whole percentage point higher of 6.5 of Black male and female combined in medical school. We know that the Black male number for medical students and hence into the workforce is somewhere hovering around 1.2 to 1.7, I think is the statistic that I have heard. And that number, the numbers have not changed. I've been in medicine now 20 years. That was the number when I was entering, and it has not changed. So you go into medicine knowing, you go into college knowing, and I want to know then what, as you reflect on that decision, are we missing in terms of trying to get more Black males like you into medical school?
I'm gonna take the URL answer, right? Is the multifactorial, right? It's a lot of things that go into it. I know for me, right, even looking at some of the similar battles, right, whether it be economically, whether it be my environment or the things that were going on around me, and just to see, how if I just didn't have my parents, right, that just made sure that we were always on the right track, or made sure that we, prioritize education, how much different my life would have been, right? Definitely the socioeconomic side of things. You have people that oftentimes not only, within the household, the issues of money become apparent, where you have to kind of, okay, do I place more emphasis on being able to get a meal tonight, or do I place more emphasis on studying for these tests? And then over time, like what that does is you kind of start living for survival versus focusing solely on your own individual academic success. Actually, I have a lot of friends, right? I remember when I was 8 years old, and everyone was asked, "Oh, what you want to be when you get older?" And if I would tell you at least half of the girls in the class wanted to be neonatologists, I would be lying. And I honestly didn't know what a neonatologist was, but it just goes to show you that a lot of our Black kids understand what they want to be early on. The problem is, how do I get from point A to point B and point B to point C while facing all of this adversity on a road that I don't have any guidance or leadership for someone who's actually been there before? It was honestly the same thing with me, as I mentioned before, right? Dr. K, like looking back, I honestly can't remember seeing a Black doctor before. Like I got to college, right? So growing up, it was always like, my parents are telling me, you could be whatever you want to be, but the road's going to be hard. And it was harder because if I wouldn't have chose Xavier, how was I ever going to get that mentorship to understand, like, oh, I need these letters of recommendation, or I need to make sure this is my MCAT score, these are my research, and all of these things. And we lose a lot of kids, specifically Black males, along the way on that path.
Well, I'm going to say this. Okay, I'm going to let's assume that we, again, have the person that is being supported, okay, has the smart young Black male that says, I want to be a doctor. I also think that we lose the student to basically the hurdles that it takes for getting into medical school. So what I've had to tell someone is that we have to start to be honest, okay, about the hurdles. And therefore, when we get students who really have a good head start, okay, we have students at different levels. We don't always have a student that has no funding, no direction, no this, no that. And oops, I found my way into college. And oops, I found my way. I want to be a doctor. Let's talk about the student that has got a shot, okay, that is not a sophomore and biology major, but they don't understand the hurdle. The hurdle is, can you keep your GPA up? Did you take the MCAT before you finished college? What about the gap year? Okay, yes or no? Can you get through, do your interviews, okay, for medical school? And understanding the steps and what each steps mean. I have seen a bigger trend. So you get through Xavier, do you take a gap year, or you go straight on to Howard?
Well, it's actually crazy. I took gap years within medical school. to get other degrees. But I went straight through. I moved to DC when I was 21. So I graduated from Xavier, and like I think a week and a half later, I was on the road in my little Corolla to move to DC for medical school.
Right.
So I went straight through.
So you planned that. So I am seeing a trend and of this gap year conversation, right? And I don't have a problem. Well, I guess I do, to be honest with you, because I didn't go straight through because I didn't get in, but I went on and got another degree, and that's a master's in public health from Emory. But what I want to say is they have not taken the MCAT. They have not even applied one time. And then they decide, I'm going to take a gap year and then I'm going to get the ball rolling. Do you understand the difference with that? You leave college and then you assume that gap year is not going to be filled with distractions. And the college time, if you let me know if you agree, is that time where you can sit down, at least take the MCAT, and then make a 5-year plan.
Yes, ma'am. So I think as far as that, specific scenario, while I personally didn't, take that route myself, I think it's more of a product of the current situation within, secondary education and medical education, and even in some cases, residency education, right? I know for me specifically, I want to go into plastic surgery. So it's been a trend now for a lot of people before residency to take a gap year to do research. I think that the biggest reason is because getting into medical school is becoming, that much more competitive, because the funnel is even tighter, right? We don't have the spots in medical schools aren't particularly increasing versus the number of people that want to get into medical schools. And, we've both been in that environment. It's highly competitive. And so is the admissions process. So you have people who killed themselves through undergrad and, I got to get this, I got to get this. So by the time you get to the end, it's like, well, damn, I'm burnt, So they take that year off. And like you said, the distractions are still going to be there. Mm-hmm. And then you have the path of, you have some people that take the gap year and, they apply, they get in. But then you have some that either apply, don't get in, and just kind of, you look and it's the gap year went from 1 year to 2 years to 3 years. Mm-hmm. And, we all have our own individual journeys, right? But that's always a consideration. And then for those who are already economically disadvantaged, right? Now you have to work, and now you have to find things, as you said, that's other quote unquote distractions, because then you still have to survive.
If someone is deciding to take the gap year, what I'm recommending is that they at least take the MCAT. You could also put yourself in a position to apply for a spot, get a spot, right? And you can defer your admissions. That's one strategy. But what we have to start doing is talking to our students about the hurdles once they get into undergrad, making sure you keep your GPA high, making sure you plan maybe in your junior year to take the MCAT at least one time. It's not going to hurt you. You don't have to record it. So you see what I'm saying? Some of these strategies, I've talked to students saying, okay, so what? You're not the best mathematics student. Then take your summers and do physics, do calculus, one class, and that will count, on the transcript. Make a strategy to succeed, not be denied.
And also, one thing that I've been talking to younger people about is, and this is, again, just personally, just me, right? I'm not the guide. I'm not on the admissions committee or anything, but I feel as though if you're going to take the gap year anyways, right? And you're going to go to school, I'm more along the lines of like, get a degree for it, right? Versus like a post-bac. Yeah, you're right. Because at that point, not only does it look better on the application, it makes you more competitive, but when it comes time for residencies, and even, when it comes time to be an attending and applying these jobs, they aren't going to look at a post-baccalaureate certificate the same way that they'll look at a master's of public health, right? Or a master of public administration, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, you have policy. You're getting a master's in policy, public policy.
Yes, ma'am.
MBA.
I have to do my capstone for my master's of public administration, and then my MBA starts on Monday, actually. So I know I want to go into hospital administration and also medical school administration with hopes of being a dean one day. So I'm just kind of, again, like trying to prepare myself so once the time comes, I don't have to like, well, I missed the job because I didn't have this. Once I graduate school, I don't want to go back. I'm just...
Well, let me just say this. Also, we talk about the time investment. I mean, I've been 20 years in this, and it is an investment of time. And what I tell students is, listen, time is going to come and go. So be in a career that you love and that you want to evolve in, right? That is what it's about. So like you're saying the same thing. Like I'm getting, and also what I tell even my residents, when they say, well, I want to be done. I said, you're never done. And you also want to put enough feathers in your hat to keep changing as medicine changes, because what people don't appreciate is medicine is an evolving specialty. We now have onset of telehealth. So anybody that was talking about primary care, internal medicine, you now have to consider that your practice is going to have a telehealth component. You have to be prepared for that. And that happened because of COVID.
That's a part of our curriculum now. As a matter of fact, I was on rotations taking telehealth calls, like right now, asking questions.
It's here to stay. So tell me about Howard. Did you choose Howard?
I did my interviews, I think January and February. So I got into Mizzou and Howard. And then I had another interview at LSU. But I'll be honest, once I got into Howard, I called LSU and I was just like, yeah, I'll turn down the interview. Somebody else might need it, because in my mind, once I got into Howard, I was like, I'm going to Howard. It wasn't even a if and buts about it. Not only was it an HBCU, but knowing that, in my mind, I was like, okay, I'm thinking cardiothoracic surgery, some type of surgery, maybe interventional cardiology. And I'm looking at Howard and I'm looking at the Dr. Cornwells or the Dr. Fords and the Dr. Rose, the Dr. Fulhams, the Dr. LaSalle. And I'm just like, all these surgeons are here just like teaching. I was like, I'm coming here. Like, this is where I want to be, because iron sharpens iron. Like, I want not only to be in a space where I could be comfortable learning, but I want people to push me. Like, I want to be the best, so I need to learn from the best. And they're the best. So, yeah, so I got in Dr. K and I was just like, I called my dad. I was like, I got this letter from Howard. They say I got in. I was like, I don't know about this LSU interview on Friday. He was like, what you mean? I'm like, I don't want to do it. Like, I'm going to Howard. He was like, well, I want you to pray about it and then call me on Friday or whatever before you respond. And I was just like, okay. I called him the next morning. It was a Tuesday. They already on Wednesday. I was like, I prayed about it. God said, go to DC. And I sent my letter and my deposit immediately. I was like, I'm going to Howard.
Well, let me say why that was a big deal. And that's a big decision, a big jump, because people may not appreciate that. First of all, you was turning down a state school, and it's a fine state school. We know that LSU has produced a number of good Black physicians as well, and but you were also at Xavier at HBCU, and you get accepted to an out-of-state private institution, which is what Howard would have meant, and that came with a big price tag. So Daddy said, pray about it, and you took a leap of faith. And you did go ahead and go to Howard, and it seems to have been a good decision. As a matter of fact, the best decision for you. And that Howard has some challenges, just like Xavier, of course, has challenges our HBCUs do. Give me some good and bad about going to Howard Medical School.
I think the bad is pretty much, the same thing with all other HBCUs, right? There probably isn't as much funding as if I went to LSU for different things, right? That's always kind of like the biggest game, right? Most of us live off campus, so it's just kind of, DC housing is overall expensive.
Yes.
But like you said, going to a private institution, right? Although Howard is one of the cheaper ones, if I went to LSU, the amount of loans I put out definitely would have been a little cheaper, because I'm from Louisiana. It's also a public school. So that's another thing. But I mean, outside of the general HBCU complaints that you hear, it's pretty much the same as far as the negative sides. But on the backside of it, right, all of the positives, the patient population for me is just beautiful. I've been able to pick up a little bit of Spanish because we have a large Spanish population that comes into the hospital.
It's good to know.
Oh, yes, ma'am. I didn't realize when I first moved up here, but I was like, I need to get on game, because I can't just be in these rooms not understanding my patients. A lot of my patients have been African-American, not only look like me, but they come from similar backgrounds as me, similar economic upbringings as I did. That's also been beautiful. But then just even being at Howard and just to see how they treat us, and also the learning autonomy, right? Like, they treat us once we get in the hospital like we're on intern level. So like they really push us. They tell us that, the reason we're so hard on you is because when you leave these doors, we want you to be the best. And I needed that. Like I'm the type of person that I'm challenge oriented, right? I need to be pushed. And that's what Howard provided for me, regardless of what HBCU setbacks, might come with it. I don't second guess my decision at all. And the mentorship as well with again, all these giants in medicine has just been the cherry on top.
I mean, I can tell you that I've worked with some fourth years when they were matching from Howard, and they got outstanding residencies. They are doing very well. I'm talking about places like University of Pitt. They got Dartmouth University. There is no shortage of residencies that a Howard student will encounter. Like,
I think we had 100% match rate this past year, as a matter of fact.
That's a big deal. That's a big deal. And so people need to understand that Howard still produces great doctors, and you will get your match. And that's something that you want to anticipate. And not only will you get your match, when you go to that next place, you're going to be able to thrive. So someone said, well, why would I go to a Black? It's not just a Black medical school. I mean, Howard has been built on a collaborative effort between everybody, Black, white, Hispanic, everybody. Community leaders have wanted to make sure Howard thrives. So the future looks bright for you.
That's my hope.
So explain to me this program that you're in with Howard. I do remember vaguely that I could have gotten an MD-JD, MPH, which I went on to get MPH first. Are you in a special program with Howard, or are you creating your own path?
So the MD MBA program is kind of like, it's been a thing for a while. I think most professional schools at Howard or master's programs could, provide that option to students. So in my cohort right now, it's for MD MBAs. We have some JD MBAs, some PharmD MBAs, a lot of in between. So I just have to take a year off to do my coursework. I think it's around like 30 something hours. And then from there, I have my MBA, then I'll go into my sub-I rotations and really just go into residency match, and I'll be finished in May of 2024.
So let me go with some curriculum changes since I'm dating myself. You hit medical school. It's you do your basic sciences your first 2 years, and then you take what we called a step one. Are we still taking that?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
And then you go off third and fourth year, and then you take step two.
So for us, right, my third year, which I just finished. So at Howard, we generally, and I think that's more the traditional way, because now, as we spoke that day, like a lot of schools are changing and it's just kind of different. Also, you have some schools with the 18-month curriculum. So there's a lot of different things, but I guess we're more still the traditional way. So after third year, we have to do CK, which is step two, and then the clinical skills, which they changed. And we did a clinical skills in-house, from our in-house clinical skills exam that replaced the CS, which was very expensive when it was happening. I think it was like $1,000. And you also have to drive to one of the places. So I did my CS, you have to take my CK, and then that'll be all of my board exams for medical school. I don't think I actually have, outside of my CK, I don't think I have any more medical school exams.
What does CK stand for?
The clinical knowledge one. So it's step two CK.
So you got step one, and you have a step two. Is step two being called CK now?
You could really just call it step two now. It's the only step two we have to take, but it used to be step two CK, and then you do step two CS, which is the clinical skills one. But
they break it up.
Yes, ma'am. But now, since they basically cut it off, and I think ours, the CS that we did at Howard, we have to see like 8 or 9 patients, and the governing body, I think that, sends the standardized patients and grades us, is a mixture of administrators from the DMV medical school. So like Howard, Georgetown, GW, EVMS, Uniform Health Services. So like all of the medical schools, I think, all put administrators and standardized patients into that. Because if I'm not mistaken, I think it was like the Mid-Atlantic medical administrators or something that gave us the exam. So we all just had to pick a day. So the good thing about Howard, we have a clinical skills center, and we also have a simulation lab.
Simulation center.
So yes, so we have, that's also a real positive for us. Like we can, practice surgeries, do advanced life support in our simulation center. And for clinical skills, it's kind of like where they teach us how to be like a practitioner. So you go in there, here's the questions you ask, here's how you do your physical exam. So that's where we did our clinical skills exam, our CS exam in that room.
And then you were saying the grading system. So
Mhm.
I remember the MCAT got changed, right? And
Oh,
so
oh,
like
I didn't even know that.
not changed, but the grading, we had 15 as the max score. Now they're saying
Okay,
yeah.
okay.
So what is it for you guys?
I think the MCAT is the highest you can get is a 520, but step
Wow.
one is pass or fail now.
Yeah, that's what you were telling
So
me. Pass, fail.
and then
Okay. And what about when we break up step 2?
so to step two, CS always was pass fail,
Oh, okay.
the clinical skills part. But CK, the clinical skills, I think they increased the passing score by like 4 points. But then that's also where more emphasis is going to come for residencies is the
That's,
CK.
so is this the first year that USMLE step 1 is passed, fail?
Hmm.
And
Yes,
so
ma'am.
you said there are some issues in terms of students not really knowing whether they'll be on part of the curve of being a
Mhm.
passing or failing.
Yeah, so that's just been that's been like a national problem. I have friends at other HBCU medical schools, just at other schools in general, who have just been, having issues with the studying side of it, just figuring out how to navigate this new test, honestly, in real time. The practice exams, like how they're graded is also different than how it was before. I think there was also issues in understanding like how to review the wrong questions that students get on these practice exams. So it's really just kind of everyone's kind of trying to figure it out on the fly. Personally, I think that long term is going to be really good. I feel that overall people do just much better, specifically minority populations do much better on CK because a lot of CK, you're exposed to it in the hospital. And a lot of people learn more by doing.
So we're talking about the basic science part. And I know that Black students historically have struggled on step
Mm-hmm.
1. Like that was a big deal. Like you didn't do well in histology and biochemistry. And so your USMLE step 1 and they got
Mm-hmm.
left behind. I mean, I went to a predominantly white medical school and there's 10 of us and we look around and then there's 6 and then we only graduate 4.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a struggle. It's very clear who's struggling. So are you saying that the pass fail is good for the basic science?
Yeah, so I think the pass fail again when you comparatively look at it, the application compare like if we're comparing step one to clinical knowledge, I feel like clinical knowledge is going to be more relevant to how we practice, right? Like what medication you give to this versus like, oh, what's the mechanism of this?
Mm-hmm.
So I definitely think step one with the basic science is while being very important. I don't want to just claim that it's not important at all. But I think that clinical knowledge is far more relevant for what we do. I think the biggest stressor, specifically for a lot of minority students who have a lot of aspirations to be surgeons or to be specific type of doctors, if you didn't get that score on step one, while you may pass it, you're still knocked out from being what you want to be. I've actually had this conversation with some residents before who wanted to do other things, but because they didn't get this score on step one, they weren't able to.
Numerical score.
Exactly. Yes, no. I think getting students to where they're proficient, like to pass it, should be the goal at this point, right? The curriculums to be able to adjust to this new exam is, I think, going to be the issue, right? Like, how do we better prepare our students for this type of exam versus previously? Because, they just didn't change the scoring of it. They're definitely going to change a lot of different things. It's kind of like a wholesale overturn of the previous system. So I definitely think this is the first time. I think there's going to be some improvements made on levels administratively across the country. So I definitely think like in the future, it's going to be a lot better. I just think it's kind of like that first bump in the road. So people kind of shook by it. So now they're going to be more aware, more prepared, more hyper-focused on how to make sure it doesn't happen again.
Just so for completion, after step 1, step 2, and this is something else our students also, anyone preparing for medical school, you have step 3, which will allow you to sit for a licensing exam and get your license. And I say that because Texas has an extra licensing exam, even though you have passed step 3, you present that to Texas, for instance, and then you still have to take I think we have to take a law exam to get our Texas medical license. Some states don't. Louisiana didn't have one when I got my Louisiana license, but
thank God. One less test.
Right. Yeah. So I don't let my Texas license go. People need to understand that. And then you will take your boards from your residency, and you will anticipate taking your residency boards, and you will be taking your specialty oral examination, and then you will have to maintain it. So it's a life dedicated to learning. I know I could talk to you another 2 hours, but let me just say this. Let me ask you this in summary. I want you to give your best advice to someone in high school, someone in college, and someone going to medical school.
As far as students in high school, I think that's kind of like the biggest step forward as far as like figuring out what you want to do in life, and most importantly, kind of figuring out yourself. Like what do you want to be? What are your likes? What are your dislikes? How do you operate as a person? Finding self.
Do you think somebody can find that in high school?
I don't think completely. I think also through college and also other things, but I think high school is where you kind of find that foundational piece of self, right? While you may not be fully on your own, high school is where your parents kind of, give you a little bit more freedom, a little bit more trust. And then that is kind of like your buffer to adult life, right? When you're in high school, I know for my parents, they kind of incrementally gave me more freedom till my senior year. It was just kind of like, okay, you're going to college next year. So here is where all this time we put in, invested in you and raising you and in helping you along the way. Here is where you start to begin to kind of display that, right? So for high schoolers, be yourself. Find, what you like to do. Find your passions. Hold on to them. And continue to work hard and just keep fighting. High school may seem like the end of the world. There's a lot of things that kind of happen during that time. You lose friends, you make friends, you fail classes, you fail tests, you pass them. So it's a real big transition period. So just kind of keep your head down, keep pushing, and just kind of have fun. As far as college students, you're going to make mistakes, right? This is, you're an adult now. Life may seem like it's ending every random Tuesday in September. And especially for those that are going the pre-med track, right? We've both been through it. It's brutal, but God puts us in different positions in life because we're meant to be there, not only because we want to be there. And then if you made it that far, just keep fighting, right? It's going to be hard, but, further down the road, when you're looking at it, it's going to be a whole lot easier, and you're going to appreciate it a whole lot more. I know for myself, Xavier, is taking us through the ringer. But looking back on it now, it prepared me, right? I made friends of a lifetime.
For college kids, also tell them it doesn't get easier. You just learn how to manage better.
Exactly. And that's the thing. I think that should be everyone's motto for adulthood. Nothing really changes in adulthood. You just know how to, and that's something that I made 26 in June. And I think this is the first time is registering to me that like, this is my life now. Like I'm an adult, but I understand how to handle these challenges because I've experienced them before since whether it be college, whether it be medical school. So it's all about, again, like knowing yourself, knowing how you handle things and finding healthy coping mechanisms. I think while high school is kind of preparing you for that adult life, college is like you're in the car of adult life and, you have all the seat belts and all of the cushion and stuff because you're kind of like a crash dummy trying to figure it out and trying to get through it. But again, just, be focused. Trust yourself, trust your faith, or whatever you may believe in, or whatever you may not believe in. Just keep grinding, just keep pushing. Believe in yourself above all. Self-belief will get you through some very low valleys. So just remember, bro, like it gets better. It always absolutely gets better. And for medical school, you in hell for 4 years. Once you figure out, what works for you, whether it be studying, whether it be your schedule, once you hit the ground rolling, you figure things out, it's beautiful, right? You finally, you're reaping the benefits of what you've been working so hard for, right? You're a student doctor, as Dr. K said at the beginning, like you're Dr. Wiltz or Dr. whatever it may be. So you're finally in that zone where you're helping people and where, you're getting that first taste of what you're going to be doing for the rest of your life. So enjoy it. Right. Your hard work, and you're going to continue to work hard. Right. It is not going to just get easy all of a sudden, but you're finally starting to see the beginning increments of your labor.
In medical school, what I said was you're learning to be a professional, and it doesn't matter your mood. It does not matter how you feel. You have to get that discipline to say, I am a professional. And I have a job today to do that I chose to do, and that I'm choosing to continue to do. So, when you go into that realm of going to professional or graduate school, that's truly how you must go at it, and that, not to say that we become emotionless, you have your emotions, but part of being a professional is knowing that you have to be able to separate that emotion, the emotions of the day with the tasks that you're given and apply your knowledge and go forward, right? And perform the task.
100%.
Yeah, so that's just something that I actually read. Like in medical school, I was reading like The Road Less Traveled. I had these books that helped me support my emotional development as a young person dealing with medical school, the stress of it all, like you said, how you view where you are. One of my best mentors, Dr. Gina Gray, who was the first Black surgeon to finish from, I want to say Tulane. I hope I'm not dating, but she is from Louisiana as well. And she just, said, if you don't have a goal as you go about the day, you might as well be digging ditches. Everything you do from studying, there has to be a reason why. There has to be a purpose at the end of the day. When you go in that library to sit down, you better come out knowing something. I was like, okay, after your surgical rotation and you have to go read, your goal is to learn something that'll benefit you for the next day. Because other than that, you might as well just be doing something mindless. Is that how you approach it?
Oh, yes, no. And I mean, again, kind of like me, you talk about a lot, like anytime you tell me something, I put it in my planner because again, like those goals is kind of what keeps my gears turning. Like I know if, today I have to do X, Y, Z and I have to knock it through. Not only do I want to get it done, but I want to get it done to like the best way that I possibly can. I remember you asked me about planning the residency fair, and I think it was kind of like the same thing. I took it on as kind of like a project from myself, and then it was just every little thing about it, to the name cards, to even the projector with the pictures. It was like, if I want to do something, I'm going to do it, but I'm going to do it to the best that I possibly can. That's also one thing that I also can tell to all of us from high school to college, medical school, even beyond, right? If you're going to do something, do it. Like put your all into it, right? And just live with the results. At the end of the day, all we can control is ourselves.
That's right.
And I think oftentimes, we place more investment and more time and care into what other people have to say or what other people think about us. At the end of the day, do what makes you happy. Do it to the best that you can and live with the results. Because that's all we can do. That's all we can do.
That's all we can do. So we're going to talk again when you get this MBA. And
yes,
we're
ma'am.
Before then. I'm going to see you before then. But I'm going to check in with you and see how we're, progressing. I love it. I love this story. And you have some active things that you're doing at Howard. I want to give you a minute to tell me all of the extracurricular, student enhancing, community outreach that you're doing at Howard. Let us know what you're doing so that we can put it on this platform. And I'd love to also reciprocate and be on your platform if I'm worthy.
Yes. Oh, yes, ma'am. Definitely. We definitely got something cooking up to have you on the podcast. So again, like that's what I've been working on with one of my mentors. She's a pediatrician, Dr. Forrester, and she has a nonprofit called ENT Youth Services. And, she came to me because she heard one of my best friends who also, he just matched in urology at University of Chicago.
All right.
Shout out to Josh. We did a podcast during the pandemic, just kind of talking about sports and then Tiger King. There's a lot of stuff that boys talk about. And she heard about it and she was like, I love, she listened to it and she heard the student talking about it. So from there, she wanted to do one catered towards important topics for young people, specifically in the teenage age group. So I think we've done about 5 or 6. We just did one on emotional intelligence. We had a 2-part series with some DC Metro police officers about things that we can do to kind of mitigate the tension between our communities, but also kind of move forward together because we all want the greater good. We also have one on mental health with some of our psych residents. So, the podcast is doing really well. We're actually planning like another episode now, and we also want to plan to get you on there.
Absolutely.
So that's been something really big that I'm happy to be a part of.
Okay, and the podcast is called?
It's just ENT Youth Services Podcast.
We want to make sure we have. And then what else you're doing? Anything else you got cooking?
So my MBA, been just doing some research with one of my research PIs. Yeah, outside of that, I was elected student council president.
You was up into it. I saw that.
But because I'm in business school, I had to step aside and appoint someone else. But anytime they reach out to me, I'm always there to help them. If they have any questions, I still make sure to help. I still try to be visible in like an aid form because at the end of the day, I may be in business school, but my heart is in the College of Medicine. So anything they may need need from me, I'm always there. I'm always a text or phone call away. So while I may not be in an official capacity, whenever they may need me, I'm there.
All right. I got you. Thank
Yes, ma'am.
you so much. And it's always a pleasure. And we will be checking in with what the doctors say. The Uzima Health and Wellness podcast with Dr. Wiltz.
Yes,
All
ma'am.
right.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right. We'll talk, bro. Appreciate you.
Yes, ma'am.
What the doctor say?